Today I'm going to be working with some hot press watercolor paper and the incredible white mask Liquid Frisket by Graphics, as well as the dipstick and the frisket remover, as well as some watercolors. In April of 2025, I did have another Technique Tuesday where I was working with the Liquid Frisket by Graphics, but that time I was working with the Dura-Lar wet media. If you want to see that video, I will have it linked in the upper right hand corner here for you. But meanwhile, the first sheet here, I'm really going to just start to play with an incredible white masking Liquid Frisket along with some watercolors on this watercolor paper. I'm going to use this smaller sheet just as like a place to play a little bit to get the feel of it. When using the dipstick for the first time, it's good to rinse off the nibs and then blot it dry before using the Liquid Frisket. One thing I've found is an advantage of using the Graphics Liquid Frisket is that it stays kind of shiny, so you can see even when it's dry where you've placed your marks. So I'm just finishing up making marks on this. You'll notice I keep pulling at the nib a little bit, and that's because a bead of the dried frisket has built up on the tip, and I just pluck that off. I think mostly it's because I'm in Arizona and things dry really fast here. Now I am applying this watercolor. I am getting it really juicy. I'm getting the surface wet with my mister, applying color, allowing it to just flow where it wants to. I really want to see more of a really watercolor kind of background coming through. And then I'm going to start to add some layers using that frisket after I've pre-added some watercolors to it. Now, one of the things I was cognizant of watercolors is not water. It's water soluble, so it's not permanent. So when I go in to add a second layer of watercolors, I risk making mud. So this is something I am cognizant as I'm going into this. But I have to say, this was so much fun. Now the Graphics Incredible White Mask Liquid Frisket kit comes with both the nib and the Frisket eraser. So now that this is completely dry, and I have dried this with my hair dryer, not a heat tool, and I had no problems with the Frisket burning or melting or anything like that. I am pulling that up. The initial Frisket I'm pulling up with this eraser, the Frisket eraser. I'm going to come in with a second layer of watercolors to start to add different layers and building those layers up in order to create a fun background that I can then use as collage fodder or what have you. So June is my granddaughter's name, and I had pulled up the Frisket where I put her name down, and this time I'm now going around the outside of that lettering. I go around the whole name with the Liquid Frisket just to build up a different color in where I've pulled the Liquid Frisket up, and you'll see that come here in a little bit when we start to add color and then pull up that final layer of Liquid Frisket. So now that Liquid Frisket, the second layer, has dried, I'm coming in with these metallic watercolors. Unfortunately, I have no idea where I got these. I think these were very inexpensive. And I'm going to add color in the areas that I have added a second layer of the Liquid Frisket over those empty spaces that I revealed by pulling up the Frisket. So you'll see I just chose to go over the word June with a lighter metallic watercolor. This was probably not the best decision, as you'll see in the end. Probably should have gone in with that dark blue or even the red, the pinkish red that is on there as an option as well. It would have made it pop out a little bit more, I think. So I've gotten that small sheet of doodles set aside, and now I'm going to come in and try the same method with the watercolors, but this time adding a stencil into the mix. Now I have to say this is probably my favorite sheet that turned out. but it was also incredibly time consuming. And even though it was time consuming, I would definitely do this again. And how I've overcome a couple of my obstacles, one of having watercolors mixing with second layer of watercolors to make mud, is I'm trying to keep the colors in their own family, just different hues, shades of that same kind of color, or at least in the same family. So you're gonna see that this sheet is a lot of all the same types of colors and kind of gradiated, and then my next sample sheet will be the same thing, and I'm going to try and work that way in order not to create a lot of mud, as well as utilizing those metallics to build up color, but in the same family, but a different type of watercolor, more of a translucent watercolor that sits on the top. Now, in terms of how I'm laying down the Liquid Frisket, I am through this stencil is I am trying to break up bodies. So the bulk of the larger areas, the circles, I'm not really filling in the circles. If there's a secondary circle in the large circle, I'm filling that in. I'm filling in the spaces around the circle to encapsulate that, and just working. And then the next step over, so these are kind of in a line, these circles are kind of nestled together in rows, and the next row I'll kind of change that kind of rule, I'm air quoting here, this kind of rule that I've created for myself, so that I have spaces of white that are going to break up that color so that I can come in with additional layers. Something that I'd like to note, which would probably make this easier for you, is that I learned quickly when I was working before how fast this Liquid Frisket was going to be drying for me, especially here in Arizona. Now, where you might be, it might not dry as fast, but I felt like I needed to do one row at a time and work like that across the sheet from left to right. That just worked best for my method here, but you do what's best for you, and I really highly suggest you experiment a little bit first and get a feel for what you're doing, and so you can make those decisions for what works best for you. Here's something else that was really helpful. I was able to use that Frisket removing eraser, to remove the Frisket from my stencil before I go back in to do a secondary line off that stencil, and that was really helpful. So I've laid the Frisket on that first row, and now I've come in and I'm putting down the watercolor. I'm bleeding it out a little bit to the right. I'm going to get this dry, and then I'm going to go in and add my second row of stenciling, and then add that color and do the same process repeatedly to the end of this page. So here's a couple tricks that I'm learning as I've been working on this piece, is to work on small sections. So I've been working on 2 over and just 4 down on this particular pattern of the stencil. I'm adding my Liquid Frisket by Graphics using the nib. I pull it up while it's still wet. I rinse off my nib and then I rub it off onto a towel, not a paper towel because you'll get fuzzies in your nib. And then once this is dry and my stencil is dry, I'm going in and I'm picking up the excess Frisket on the stencil, both front and back, and then going to the next section and doing the next two, the next segment, and then making my way down, allowing this to just sit like it is, and then coming in with the watercolor. That I have found gives you a better representation of the stencil. You could see I kind of lost that in this row, and here I had gone a little bit slower. Now it is slow, but I just am really loving the variables going on here. The pieces of the stencil we can see, along with a different way that the watercolors are mixing with the different layers that are peeking through. I'm making sure, something I tried here was to come over and have 2 layers of watercolor, so I'm making sure to do that. I came out a little bit further with my watercolor, so I've layered it up here. So that I'm going to continue on with this and then come back and show you the final. Well, I couldn't be more pleased with the results of these papers, which I'll show you in just a minute, using the incredible white masking Liquid Frisket along with the nib and the eraser by Graphics. Total fun. So this was my tester sheet that I used the nib on, and then did watercoloring. This is where I used a stencil along with the nib to apply. This is more of just the nib, no stencil, just making marks. And again, this time I used mark making tools, a piece of bamboo, and just a plastic palette knife to go through and make marks onto the paper, and then I added watercolor. So that these have been a lot of fun. I am going to continue to play with the Liquid Frisket. I've learned a lot and I'm excited to keep experimenting.